And firstly, I want to begin by thanking the regional group for bringing forward what is a very important motion on an issue that is of real concern to farmers, the length and breadth of this state. And I think we do have to start from the point that to date this has been handled very, very badly. We've had reports from Europe, most of which have come to farmers via the media. It is not the way to bring farmers with us, and it is very much a prime example of how not to do climate action when it comes to agriculture. Everything in relation to farmers, climate action, what we are asking farmers to do, and also rewarding farmers for what they are doing, has to be with bringing farmers with us, and that is absolutely critical if we are to meet the targets that have been set out. And we also have to be mindful of the fact that farmers are up for the challenge of climate action. They want to look after and care for their land, and they want to see it retained and minded for the next generation. Of that there is no doubt. And the latest example we've seen of that is the huge oversubscription of farmers into the Acres scheme. They wanted to be part of it, they did what was asked of them, and then they were not paid. And payments that were due last December did not come through till 2 months later, and the balancing payment, which was due at the end of May, has now been pushed out to the end of June. And that is again another example of not how to do climate action on behalf of the government. When farmers get involved, when they're up for the challenge, and sometimes they're accused of not being up to it, when they get involved, they do what's asked of them, and then the government let the side down. That is not good enough. It shouldn't happen. And this government need to make absolute certain that the balancing payments for Acres participants are paid at the end of this month and not any later. And this government also need to ensure that for the new and latest Acres participants, they are paid on time. It is absolutely essential, because otherwise what is known as the flagship environmental scheme within the Department of Agriculture, it will not work, and we will not see farmers engage in it. And why should they, when they're not paid for what they are being asked to do? And of course, some of the compliance and measures that you have to take part in some of these schemes cost money. So farmers are down money then as well, at a time when costs are already through the roof, and so many of them are struggling as it is. When the nature restoration came before Europe, there was a number of debates at the time, and the point was made that an impact assessment had not been carried out. I recall the front page of the Farmers' Journal from the Department of Housing, your own department minister, saying that an impact assessment would be taken and would be underway. I'd really like to know where that is at. There are a number of outstanding issues in relation to where we are now, and as we approach and look at the national plan, which will be really, really important. And the point has been made here several times in relation to voluntary, and the fact that measures within this new law have to be voluntary. And again, that is proven in what has been said here by everyone on this side of the House, and I do appreciate and accept what the government have said in relation to measures being voluntary. That's really important. Any large change to land use, such as being proposed in nature restoration, has to be handled very carefully. We all know in this House how precious land is to farmers and what it means to them. It can be a very emotive issue, and we need to come at it very carefully in relation to the national plan. And I would call again on the most widespread of consultation at all levels, not just within the farming community, within our rural communities, but that everyone is brought to the table and we find that balance. This is not going to be the first issue, nor is it the first issue, where environment and farming have different ideas and different views in relation to an issue, and that is why we have to find the balance and we have to get it right. It is so important. In relation to funding, it has been said here time and time again, we need a dedicated fund separate to CAP. And by the looks of the law as it has been passed to date, they are talking about looking at the next multi-annual financial framework post-2027. So that lack of guarantee in relation to funding at EU level is of concern to farmers. And again, when you look at Acres and how they have been treated financially in relation to that, farmers are going to be seeking absolute guarantees in relation to payments, and it has to be done outside of CAP. CAP was initially established to support food production. It has moved an awful lot to environmental matters. We need to hold CAP for what it was brought about for, and anything else needs to be additional to that. I've raised the point of compensation before. We had an amendment in and passed in the text initially last July. That was then removed. Compensation is really important, and the Minister knows that because he attended the same meeting I and others did from farmers that are farming near lands being rewetted at the moment by Bord na Móna. They weren't looking for a red cent in compensation. They were looking for a guarantee that if there was any damage done, it would be rectified. I think that's a fair ask, and I think it's something that we have to ensure is there to ensure that farmers feel protected from any decisions made on rewetting. I want to also just finally raise the issue that has been raised by the INHFA, and they are a real organisation that need to be really discussed and brought to the table in relation to what has been asked under this new law. The idea of the priority being given to Natura 2000 sites up to 2030 is really of concern to them and to many farmers. They are the farmers that are already doing the most in relation to nature and restoration on their lands. They are very restricted in relation to the farming and the farm practices they can carry out on their lands already. So I would ask that that widespread consultation begins as soon as possible, and if the Minister could give us an update as well on that impact assessment, I think that's really important.
Thank you, Deputy.